Welcome back to the Daily Bible Breakdown. Today's passage is Genesis chapters 10 and 11. And what we find happening in chapters 10 and 11 is the incident known as the Tower of Babel. Basically, the earth is now in the process of being repopulated once again, and they all currently still speak the same language. And so they decide, rather than spreading out and going different directions, they're going to stick together, and they're going to build a tower that reaches to heaven, and they're going to build a city. And they say they're doing this because they want to make a name for themselves and because they want to stay all together there in that one place. And so under the direction of a man named Nimrod, they begin this task. Interestingly, when you read chapters 10 and 11, you're going to find that what you read in chapter 10 is actually the detailed breakdown of what happens after the event of chapter 11. And sometimes you'll find that when you're reading through the book of Genesis especially, it's organized more thematically than it is chronologically in some cases. And so that's what's happening. So the event happens in chapter 11, and then all the talk about spreading out by different tribes and families actually is what happens after the Tower of Babel. So what does God do? He sees what they're doing, building this city, building this tower, and he decides to stop it. He says, otherwise they would go on to do even greater wickedness. And so he does this by confounding their language, literally causing all of them to start speaking different languages so they could no longer communicate and no longer organize this massive building project. And this becomes the origin of the nearly 7,000 different languages we have on the earth today. So they're all now speaking different languages. They all have to group up by those languages and go their separate ways. It seems, based on reading the passage, that they might have actually finished the tower, at least getting as high as they thought they needed to get. But it was the city that they stopped building when God came down and confounded their languages. And the reason we call it Babel, by the way, the reason it's called Babel is because that sounds like the Hebrew word for confusion. Now, I know one of the big questions is, why did God stop them? What was wrong with what they were doing? Well, there are two really simple reasons. First, it was an issue of pride. They said they wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to be known for what they were doing there. And so they were lifted up in their own self-importance. So it was an issue of pride. Secondly, it was just simple disobedience. God said to spread out and populate the earth, and they said, no, we're going to stay all together in one place. We don't want to be scattered. We're going to do it our way. So God had to stop them because of their pride and because of their disobedience. Now, when you get to the end of chapter 11, you're going to be introduced to the family of Abraham. And at this point, he's still called Abram. But we're going to meet his family. And this is important because starting in chapter 12, everything is going to be centered on the life of Abraham and his descendants. At the end of chapter 11, we're concluding that history of mankind in general, and we're moving on to the history of Israel in particular. That's it for our Daily Bible Breakdown. We'll see you tomorrow when we jump into Genesis chapter 12.